the borough of Queens, New York City. It's a borough that's made up of 99 neighborhoods, spanning more than 282 square kilometers to become the largest of the 5 boroughs. It has a population of 2.3 million residents, slightly trailing the dense borough of Brooklyn. If it were its own city, it would be the 4th largest in America. Queens is also the borough which I call home and the place where I grew up. It's known as the world's borough, as it contains one of the most diverse populations on the planet, where more than 800 languages have been recognized by the Endangered Language Alliance. Hi, I'm Jose, and I welcome you to Queens, New York City, the most diverse urban area in America. On this tour, we'll travel to the Asian-inspired neighborhood of Flushing, where residents descending from all over Asia make up 60% of the demographics. From classic temples to markets and shops, we'll explore the uniqueness and history of the area and how it sets itself apart in a borough that represents more than 120 countries. So let's go on tour and experience the world's borough of Queens, New York City. The borough of Queens, New York City, an area that's mostly residential neighborhoods with the most diversified economy across America's largest city. And the early morning commute brings silence to the busy train wagons, as the reality of living in the glamorous New York is one of building patience, where the metro system becomes the most viable form of transportation to get across this giant city. A massive system with more than 450 stations traveling across 665 rail tracks. New York City is a fast-paced environment, and a morning drive on the Brooklyn-Queens Expressway or crossing the Queensboro Bridge showcases the frenzied lifestyle of living in the city. But in the northern parts of Queens, we come to the ruins of a former tradition that brought together countless nations. As the sun slowly rises, the parking lots adjacent to the Van Wyck Expressway fill with customers making their way to the big storefronts. Our journey begins with the history of Flushing. The neighborhood of Flushing. It's a neighborhood that was a pop culture symbol during the early 1900s. Along with Corona, Queens, Flushing shares the Flushing Meadows Corona Park, which was famous for hosting both of the World's Fair that took place in New York City, and also becoming the assembly of the United Nations until 1952. Flushing's history starts in the mid-1600s when English nonconformists settled in the area. These nonconformists didn't belong to the established Church of England, as they were mostly Protestant Christians. New York City became the territory of New Amsterdam, where Quakers from the Netherlands regions further inhabited the area. And one of the most notable Quakers was John Bound, who built the Quaker House of Worship. During this period, England was persecuting Quakers for not belonging to the Orthodox Church. By the late 1800s, over 10,000 Quakers had been imprisoned, and more than 200 had been killed in lieu of torture and execution. Flushing was built as a community of refugees and those seeking religious freedom. The area experienced its early signs of multicultural expansion in the mid-1800s, and a blossoming growth came in the form of the 7 train line, which connected to Manhattan. By the middle of the 20th century, a surge of Asian immigrants arrived in the area. The repeal of the Exclusion Act opened the gates to new immigrants from Japan and Chinese residents who felt alienated by the predominantly Cantonese-speaking Chinatown of Manhattan. The Mandarin-speaking community paved the way for this territory to become a mecca of Asian culture. Welcome to one of New York's busiest shopping districts, Main Street, Flushing, the hotbed of Asian American markets. Flushing's Main Street is a multicultural wonderland. And this wonderland contains some of the most densely populated streets across New York, where local shops and fruit stands are custom tailored to the ethnic enclave of the community. And standing by the crossing lights you can simply absorb the amount of foot traffic moving abound in the neighborhood. Delicious delicacies attract residents and visitors alike. Downtown Flushing is the fourth largest central business district in New York City, where the colorful business signs bring familiar products from Eastern territories, and lanterns can be found in front of stores as vendors prepare for the coming Lunar New Year celebration. As I walk through the fast-paced community, I'm just in awe by all the shops to explore. The influx of immigrants that established their roots in the neighborhood brought all their traditions and customs from every corner of the globe. These traditions have spilled over into the New York lifestyle, where residents from every corner of the city come to entertain the curiosity. And they get trapped in this busy hub of commercial vibrancy, which mixes a version of China and Koreatown to create an American fusion, where even I get lost in the crowd. The integration of cultures contains everything from traditional American fast food to noodles and seafood restaurants. Flushing is a food lover's paradise, and in New World Mall, you can find just about anything. Flushing is renowned for Korean barbecue, dumplings, Taiwanese, Cantonese, halal, and Middle Eastern cuisine, enough to fill the bucket list of any food aficionado. An unforgettable experience of the fast-paced New York City lifestyle we've come to love in cinema. And outside of the busy shops, it remains a thriving neighborhood and the most populous in New York City. An epicenter of architectural development, filling the demands of a growing population. Back to the Flushing Meadows Corona Park, we explore a darker history of the community. Flushing was founded on religious freedom. Peter Stuyvesant, the governor appointed to lead New Netherland, banned any religion outside of the Dutch Orthodox Church. This pushed the citizens of Flushing to sign into law the Flushing Remonstrance. It would uphold any religious freedom for the inhabitants of the area. On Northern Boulevard is a place of worship from the early days of Queens. Peter Stuyvesant, the governor appointed by the Dutch West India Company, oversaw New Netherlands, a leader who brought growth to the colony, but became an unpopular dictatorial ruler. Demonstrated in these documents from the 1600s, Flushing's religious experience had become a hostile environment. The residents of Flushing signed the Remonstrance to exempt the ban of Quaker worship, in which Stuyvesant rebutted by arresting and imprisoning those who signed it, a seditious and mutinous act needing correction and punishment. The tyrannical leader had lost the support of the village, in which the citizens surrendered to the British, turning their backs on Stuyvesant during the siege of New York. The history of Flushing and its prosperity comes down to John Bowne and his fight with Peter Stuyvesant. The citizens of Flushing pushed back towards Stuyvesant's intolerance, and the Quaker House is one of the icons remaining from that fight. It was established as the home of John and Hannah Bowne for their growing family, but later it became a meeting house when Stuyvesant began to ban other religions. And if Stuyvesant was alive today, it would be a complex environment to pass his despotic laws. From Bowne's courageous fight grew the seeds of modern Flushing. In creating a melting pot of cultures, the community has been re-envisioned with beautiful temples. Flushing's town charter of 1645 was the first in America to be granted religious freedom. And in modern America, it has become the most religiously diverse city, where we find many temples similar to this Buddhist house of worship. The minute details engraved in the architecture transport visitors to familiar environments of their homeland. And making our way to Bound Street, named after our religious hero, we spot from a distance a fascinating landmark. The Ganesh Temple, the second oldest Hindu temple in the United States. It was constructed by skilled architects that came directly from India. This remarkable temple opened its doors to a group of people who also faced persecution similar to the early Quakers. I walk around the neighborhood just admiring the beauty of the temple and the other 10 places of worship on this street alone. During Flushing's remonstrance, Peter Stuyvesant arrested John Bound, eventually deporting him back to England. It was through this road that Bound made it to Holland, which he vocalized the rights of the citizens of Flushing and the writings of the Charter. Nestled in the heart of Flushing is the Han Ma Zen Temple, a rich and visual delight of traditional Korean architecture belonging to the largest Buddhist order from South Korea. The Jugye order of Korean Buddhism dates back to the 11th century, with only 4 branches being established in the United States. The bright decor and colorfully carved wooden eaves make this temple stand out among the suburban neighborhood. And walking past the temple makes me realize the importance of the neighborhood and how these actions inspired the freedoms of the First Amendment. Centuries after the governance of Peter Stuyvesant and the hunt for the nonconformists, Flushing has become a place of religious pluralism with over 200 different houses of worship. As our tour winds down, I take a final trip on the 7 train. The 7 train line is the transportation heart of this section of Queens. It begins in Hudson Yards and ends right here in Flushing. The 7 train has become one of the most beloved train lines and the lifeline of Queens. While other lines were created to reach a destination, the 7 train was built for the purpose of expanding the Queens borough. And we can hear the sounds of the above-ground tracks in action. As we pass by the train lot at Willets Point, the numerous 7 trains docked at the lot tell the story of Queens. The inclusion of the line brought an industrial and real estate growth to the borough in the early 1900s, where population jumped from 284,000 to more than 1 million in a span of 20 years. The 7 train was the first metro line in Queens and often topped the list of best subways in the city. It's the only train line with 11 cars, exceeding the ones in Manhattan, which usually consist of 8 to 10 cars, a result of its popularity and transporting all the visitors to the World's Fair, the ground which we return to in closing of this wondrous journey. The neighborhood of Flushing is truly a fascinating piece to the greater New York story. From the many cultures that added to the narrative of the area, to the tumultuous history that became an inspiration for the First Amendment, Flushing truly exemplifies the meaning of the world's borough. I'm Jose, and I thank you for joining me on this tour of Flushing, New York City. Until next time.